Hey everybody, so I thought I would do a little video on how my trip this year came together. And last year I had done a big loop, Northern California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, Southern California, 8,000 miles, about 2 months, and that was like super fun. And at that time I couldn't fit in, kind of wanted to go to New Mexico, never ridden there. I'd ridden some in Colorado on the Tat. Um, but it just didn't logistically work out and didn't work out time-wise. So this year I thought I would buy a truck. I bought a Toyota Tacoma that I can fit my bike in the bed of with a couple of small ramps. And I would just drive out there from San Francisco, do my riding, and do some sort of loop, and then drive back. So I also, to get the Northern California and Oregon tracks last year, I had used some of GPS Kevin's routes. So um, I'd use the Pacific, I think he calls it the Pacific Crest ride, but he's also got these tracks for the Continental Divide. So these crisscross the Continental Divide Trail. You can't ride on the Continental Divide Trail on a motorcycle, so he's connecting forest roads and other dirt tracks that sort of crisscross the Continental Divide Trail. So I planned to just use basically New Mexico and Colorado tracks in conjunction with the BDR tracks. They just happen to not overlap a lot. Um, and combining those, I could get a loop. So um, this is not the tracks I started with, but this is the route I rode basically. So I went from San Francisco to Santa Fe, and then I rode south this way, Orange, Green, State and Reserve, Silver City down to the border, and then I hopped over on paved roads through El Paso to Del City, Texas, which is where the BDR starts. And I ride the BDR south to north, which is sort of the way they recommend to go. And I made sort of different stops depending on what kind of mileage I did. Like this first day, I actually started in El Paso because there's no lodging in Del City anymore. So I did a long day and then sort of a shorter day, and then I more or less took the stops the BDR had after that: Truth or Consequences, Reserve. Um, and then up here near Pine Hill, I got a flat, so I had to divert out to a different city to get that fixed. I would have ended up in Grants that night. Um, what is this city? Gallup. So I diverted out to Gallup to a tire shop there to get that tire fixed. And then I decided the two routes do overlap in this section between Grants and Cuba, so I decided just to slab it to Cuba to make up the day. And then I went back to Santa Fe, loaded up and drove my truck to Denver, flew home for about 10 days, and then flew back. And then from Denver, I went to Kremling, parked my truck at a storage place there, and then I did basically the same thing. I rode south on the Continental Divide, Salida. They overlap here in the middle a little. Down through, what's this town? Del Norte, I believe. Yep. And then back, I actually rode back down and finished these two sections in New Mexico. So I stayed in Abiquiu. And then I did the BDR hard section through here, and then back up to Chama, where I sort of ended my New Mexico travels, and then I slabbed it to Cortez, which is the start of the BDR. You can go down to Four Corners, but Four Corners was closed because of COVID, so I decided just to pick up the trail in Cortez where the dirt starts. So you ride up past Telluride. I think I stayed in Silverton. You do Ophir Pass, so I thought I had time that day, so I went ahead and did Ophir Pass. Stayed in Silverton. Hotels in Telluride were really pricey, so you're sort of I'm not camping. I'm staying in hotels, so I'm sort of like looking for places to stay a day ahead or so, and figuring out like where I can get a room at a reasonable rate. Then the next day, the Alpine Loop, amazing. You go through, California, Cinnamon, Corkscrew passes down into Lake City. Then the next day, there's some pretty good passes. And yeah, just picking my way north on the BDR, Buena Vista. I couldn't stay in Buena Vista. I actually had to go back out to Salida. This is around July 4th, so that July 4th weekend, it was kind of hard to get lodging sometimes. And then there's great riding out of Buena Vista, great trails. And then the BDR ends up in Gypsum, but there's a fire here, so I had to sort of divert, and there was mudslides on I-70, so I couldn't take I-70, so I had to find this other route to get up to Gypsum the next day. And then the next day there's a fire, I think the Sylvan fire, or there's two fires. There's I think the Sylvan fire was maybe in the south, and then there's it's called the Muddy Slide fire that's like west of Kremling. And then the last couple nights I stayed in Steamboat Springs. So in one day I rode up to the border, finished the BDR, and then I rode back south to Kremling to get the truck and load up, and then back to Steamboat Springs with the truck. And then I basically rode out towards, what is this? This is 40. I rode out towards Utah and Salt Lake City. Saw some friends there. So this is the route I did. When I put the tracks together, I like to do a spreadsheet, and I'll put links to this stuff in the description so you guys can take a look. But this gives me a rough timeline. I get an idea of how many miles I'm going to do, where the stops will be, and then this I update as I go along to say like what actually happened and where I actually did, so I can look back on this later and say like, oh, you know, when I rode through this area, where did I stay, like what sections did I do, etc. You know, it has various notes on like logistics and stuff, and I did keep track of the hotels for a while until it just doesn't, I forgot to, and doesn't really like matter. You'll always find chain hotels pretty much everywhere. So this has about 3,700 miles on the motorcycle. I did closer to 4,000 because I think there's some highway tracks in there to connect up hotels and various things that I didn't record in the GPS. And then in the truck I did about 3,000 miles to get out there and back. So yeah, that's kind of the trip at a very high level. I took like pretty amazing photos. I guess this is like kind of this is the big loop I did last year, and then what I had done up to that point that I took this photo. So I've done about 12,000 miles in the last 12 or so months. The equipment is, I have this Tacoma and 21-500 EXC. And I carry a backpack, so I have a change of clothes. I carried a laptop for some reason. I was doing a little work at times, but I didn't really use that thing much. And my personal gear. These side cases have tube, tire tube, tools, a little bit of like chain lube and oil and stuff to support the motorcycle. So mostly tools. So I'm going very lightweight. I like to try to, you know, by myself. I carry a Garmin InReach, so I like to, you know, the small bike is just more fun for me, and also like it's easier to recover should I get into some weird situation. But in terms of maintenance, I didn't really do much to the motorcycle on this trip. I changed the oil twice. I did about 110 hours, so I'm changing it every 40 hours or so. I put a new pair of Tusk D Sports before I left on the trip, and I did the whole 4,000 miles on the trip on those tires. The rear is pretty pretty thin at the end, but there's still some center knobs there, so I was actually like, I didn't think I had bad traction even at the end. At the end of New Mexico, the bike had about 6,000 miles on it. This is some of the oil change maintenance. Stuff's pretty clean in there. This is near White Sands Missile Range. But at the end of New Mexico, the bike had about 6,000 miles on it, and my chain and my sprockets didn't look bad. The chain sliders were pretty well spent. This is my improvised get to the gas station with my flat tire. But you can see the chain sliders are wearing on the master link in the chain, so it was kind of time for new stuff. So when I flew home, I basically ordered those parts and got those parts, and then here you can see the sprocket's not too bad. It's kind of hooking a little bit, but for 6,000 miles, that's not bad. And the rear I thought to reuse, but I thought I would just just replace everything. So I went home, I got those parts, I came back, I did this train ride, which was really fun in Chama, steam powered train. And then when I came back to Colorado, I parked at like a storage facility, and then I basically just took the bike, put the bike on its side because I didn't take a stand with me, and I replaced the washer, the sprockets, the chain sliders, rear sprocket, dirt tricks, and had my truck there, so I had everything I needed to do the gig. Jesus, what a name for a gas station. And then in Colorado, yeah, beautiful. Doing all the mountain passes. Most of them were above 11,000 feet. Some of them were above 12 or almost 13,000 feet. You see some interesting wildlife out there. This rock that has like a hole in it, lava rock. And the first couple days I had a little rain. I did drop the bike once on this trip in this really muddy, rutted stuff. So this was kind of just a step off. I didn't really. My boots got pretty muddy, but I was not too bad. And I committed the sin of not looking far enough down the trail to see I was going to be getting into this rutted stuff. So got a little muddy. Was able to get my gloves and stuff cleaned off. And then Ophir Pass. This area. This is the first big mountain pass I went over. It was a little overcast, but it was and it was a little wet, but it wasn't raining, so it was actually, the rocks were fairly dry, so it wasn't too difficult a riding. Yeah, so this one's like almost 12. Met another guy on a bike up there, and then the next day I clocked over like 200 hours. You see some old mines and stuff up here. I stayed in Silverton. It's a cute town, cute hotel. Little brew pub, Golden Block Brewery. And then the next day was the Alpine Loop. So, you know, just the light isn't even good in these pictures, but like just amazing mountains and trails and great riding. Met some friendly people along the way. Hurricane Pass, 12.7. Then California Pass, almost 13,000. You can hike up this little knob. That's about 13,000. And then Cinnamon. Here's me at California Pass. And then Cinnamon Pass, 12.6. Better picture. No one was up there at that time. Yeah, then out of Lake Cities, you get into these sweeping valley trails. Hagerman Pass, which is these pictures here. This is an old railroad track. Hancock Pass. This was kind of the difficult riding. Very rocky trail up and down. The pictures don't do it justice. This is like water running in the trail. So this loose rock. There's some worse stuff. I didn't stop at the really bad places. This is kind of like the areas where I thought I could, the areas where I dared to stop. Yeah, this is, and you can see this is just loose, washed out, big rocks that want to turn your wheel for you. You can see the bark beetles killed so much of the forest up there. But yeah, it was a really fun trail. I'm not sure why I was washing the bike at all. I just would immediately get it dirty like the next day. Weston Pass, almost 12,000. But yeah, just beautiful country, beautiful mountains. I went through some of these water crossings. This one I got pretty wet in. It's deeper than it looks. These old abandoned houses and stuff. And then this is the end of the trail, the end of the BDR anyway. So I'm in southern Wyoming here, just a few miles across the border. And yeah, so I rode home, and then this is just south of Steamboat Springs, beautiful country. Put the bike in the truck and came home. So that's sort of the summary of how I did it. I think it was like super fun. I maybe only planned to do New Mexico, but I always had like Colorado as a stretch goal. And I think this dual sort of BDR CDR thing was really fun to do. It takes more time. It's more fun than slabbing it. I'll say like I did spend a lot of money on hotels. I think I spent with me driving the truck from California and then driving back and staying in hotels and all the riding I did and staying in hotels. I think I spent almost $5,000 on hotels on this trip. So it's a pricey way to do it. Like the gas and food, you know, is a little bit more, but by and large, the way I do it, where I'm not camping, the hotels by far take up the majority of the expenses, and of course, like your time, right? Like if you, it's you know, I spent about a month and a half on this one, I think, like sort of getting there and riding and getting back. I did take like a sort of 10-day break in the middle, so I basically I left like 5:20 and I got back like 7:07. So if you consider that's a little more than a week, I took taking a week off. So 4, 5, 6 weeks roughly, sort of doing the trip. But yeah, now it's time to refit the bike. New tires, wheel bearings, chain and sliders are good. Change the oil, test the oil. I'm at about 220 hours now. So get the bike refit for another adventure. So I think next it's going to be, the only BDR I haven't done out west is Nevada. And I do have some tracks for Baja, so I may do Baja in the wintertime. And of course, like Death Valley, Southern California, Mojave Road, those areas are always good winter sort of things. I mean, we're still in the summer right now, but I think I probably won't do a lot of riding the rest of the summer. I've done most of my riding now, and probably like refit the bike for some winter sort of travels. So I hope that was informative. I'll put some links in the description to these things, and you guys can take a look if you like. So have fun. Get out there and ride.